Hi everyone, welcome to this live stream. I hope you can all hear me. Please say hello in the messages. It'd be nice to know that A, you can see me, and B, just to know who's here, because otherwise it's a bit of a lonely experience sat here talking to you all. But hello Mr. Godfrey, how are you? Keanu Reeves. Now, I think I know who that is. We had a conversation, didn't we, about films earlier, Jamil, and I think we agreed that Keanu Reeves is pretty cool. Hi Josh, hi Anushka, hi Tilly, nice to see you all. How are you all doing? Are you looking forward to the weekend? I know I am. Hi Jamie, good to catch up as well. Good to see some numbers already arriving. So, the plan is to, let me show you what the plan is actually, seeing as we're here. Let me go on to here, bear with me 1 second. I'm sorry you're having to look at my face. And by the way, if you don't want to write your questions in the comments, because this really is, yeah, it's fabulous, the sun, isn't it, Mr. Godfrey? It's so nice to actually have a decent day, and I think it's going to be quite a decent weekend as well, so a lot to look forward to. Here is the plan. I know that most of you have attended most of the sessions that we've done so far, but I wanted to run through just an overview of exactly what I'm expecting in each section. I'm going to pause after each one to get some questions in case you've got a few areas that you're struggling with. I wanted to say just at the start that the quality of the work we've been getting has been really, really high, and it's been super impressive. You've been mainly getting work in on time, and the work that I've marked is of a high standard, and when I go back and ask you to improve it, you do so quickly, and I can't really ask for any more than that. So plan today is this. I want to go through the 5 feasibility tests. I want to give you a chance to ask questions. I want to do a how-to section on just hints for the structure. Now, I'm not allowed to give you a what do they call it? A writing frame. That's what I'm not allowed to give you. But I'm not going to give you a writing frame. I'm going to show you some options about how you could put this together, because otherwise it's really quite difficult. Then we're going to look forward to the rest of the unit and have a quick look forward to what's going to happen next week. Writing frame. I know, I was losing my words there. It just vanished from my head, which is quite scary, really. So this you've seen from me many times. This is the task we're after. We're conducting a feasibility study of different solutions, and it's that solutions which does cause a few problems. You need to write 5 mini essays, and they boil down to these that you can see in front of you, and some are shorter than others. Technical and economic are self-explanatory, and they are slightly longer. The legal and the scheduling are quite easy, because the scheduling just requires a Gantt chart. The legal really just requires looking at GDPR. The operational is the one that tends to catch people out, because it's more a question of understanding exactly what you're supposed to do there. So I want to go through that now. Meme Master, I was fearful the whole thing had crashed because Meme Master's comment just died, but hopefully that is Meme Master's internet and not mine. Mine seems to be working so far, so good. But it's a Friday, so who knows? So let's go back and have a look at what we're going to do today. We'll look at technical first of all. In terms of my mark scheme, and I thought this could be useful to you, because I've talked to you about what you should do. Oh, it's an emoji thing. Yeah, they tend to crash things, don't they? I tend to ask you about what you need to produce. It's sometimes really helpful to put yourself into the teacher's position and think about what it is that I'm looking for when I mark your work. And so I thought that going through the mark scheme that I use when I mark your M2 could be something that's quite handy for you. So I'll start from the beginning. One of the things that's really important is that you set the scene at the beginning, because some students just launch straight into the solution as though I know what you're talking about. So I am looking for, at the start of it, a bit of once upon a time there was a driving instructor. His name is Justin. Currently he's using a paper-based system, and he wants to move from that to using an app that I'm going to design. So it would be really helpful to have a little bit of an intro rather than just going straight in and talking about dash cams in the first page, because it's a bit jarring. So you're always going to need that introduction. It doesn't need to be long, but it needs to show that you understand the story. All right, so that's the once upon a time part. Then we go from there into the technical. And don't forget, we've got these 5 different feasibility studies to try and produce. The first one being technical. You need to offer a solution. And you also need to offer some alternatives. Now, you don't need to offer an alternative solution for every single part of it, just certain parts of it. So when I say offer a solution, I'm looking for a solution that's talking about the coding languages, the booking system and how that's going to work, the feedback, which he mentioned. You don't need to say much about it, but do you remember Justin said he wanted to have some way of giving feedback to the students? Social media integration, again, not much for you to say about that because it's really just going to be a link. The dash cam, which is going to require slightly more thinking about and more work, and the dash cam is a rich source of offering an alternative, as is the coding language that you choose, because with all of these things there's no right and wrong answer. It's just a question of researching it and showing your thinking behind it. It's that, in maths when they say show your working, that's what we're talking about here. He's also talked about accessing Tutor Pro as well, which I think is the theory part, isn't it, Mr. Godfrey, I believe, for doing the theory test. Now, Mr. Godfrey has said, imagine you're writing this for a complete novice who knows nothing about technology. Exactly. And don't forget, you're the expert. So the client has come to you. You're the one who knows how to do all of this. So that's the key thing. You're talking as though you're the expert, which you are because you're very knowledgeable, but you're simply doing it for a person who's a lay person. He's giving you money to take all of this. Theory Test Pro. Yep, okay, that's the one. We're talking about research. I'm expecting to see research. Use a table to show the documentation both for your research of languages, and don't forget, no one's expecting you to have an intimate knowledge of Java versus C++. But if you go online, you can very quickly figure out that certain languages suit certain applications better than others and certain platforms better than others. So pick a few, compare them, and just show that you've done some work around that. Also, I need to see a recommendation. So if you give me a solution and you give an alternative, say which one you're going to choose and why. The why doesn't need to be more than a sentence or two, but just to show that you've considered it and that you've worked through the various alternatives. And don't forget to cite your sources. I'm going to mention this later, but I want to say it now in case I forget. Cite your sources and save your the web links that you're using as you go along, and put it either at the end of your document or in a separate document. Because if you say to yourself, I'll go back and do it again at the end, you never will, because it's a disastrously difficult thing to do, and you can never find the same pages you were looking for before. I've said there mainly talk sense. You are an A-level student who's just started on this course. No one's expecting you to know chapter and verse about all of these different details. But are you showing that you've picked something up? Are you showing that you've made sense? No one's expecting a fully functional, perfect solution someone's going to pay £5,000 for at this stage. That's a few years away in your career yet. So in terms of structure, start with setting the scene. Please don't literally start it with once upon a time, but do set the scene and tell me what Justin's current situation is. Then break this down into smaller tasks. Go through each requirement. Remember Justin's letter. And don't forget, you took Justin's letter and put those requirements into your own words in P2. So my recommendation is go back to P2, and if you copy and paste a bit out of P2, that's fine. Just cite your sources. The sources happen to be you. It's quite legitimate. Show that you've researched the technical options, show you're working, offer alternatives, recommend a solution, and say why you're recommending it. And that's what I'm looking for in this first part. You could alternatively describe one solution all the way through in total detail, offer a few alternatives, a couple of paragraphs of alternative afterwards, and then state your recommendation and why. But I do, that slide that said go or no go that I showed a few weeks ago, that's the key thing. What should Justin do? Justin's a driving instructor. He's not an app designer. He doesn't know a broad bean from broadband. So that's your job as the expert. So we move on to, in fact, before we go to economic, I'm going to pause there and ask whether any of you have got any questions about that technical side of things and about how you set it up. I'm going to play 30 seconds of cheesy music while you get your questions to me. My email address is above my head, so have a quick think about anything you want to ask there. So Mr. Godfrey is asking me, so these alternatives, does that mean a computer version, Kindle version? Yes, absolutely. When I mark it, that's a good question. When I mark it, I'm just looking to see that you're offering an alternative approach. And it could be anything. It could be any of these. You could be offering a computer version, a Kindle version, and of course, the more versions that you offer, the more expensive it gets. But it's still offering different alternatives. It could be offering an alternative language. It could be offering a different way of doing the dash cam. The dash cam's a good place to offer alternatives. But as long as you're because by showing an alternative, you're demonstrating that you've actually done that research and you have a good overview of the topic. Because very quickly when you go online and type in what's best for mobile applications, which programming language, you can see people have already done that work for you. People will be talking about Java, comparing it to Python. Sometimes you've got to pay more for a coder for one. Sometimes one suits a mobile more, one's quicker online, etc. Mr. Godfrey says, offering a forward-facing app with simple links to Google Calendar or Theory Test Pro, etc. Exactly. So, one of the approaches you can do all the way through is to offer, remember I was talking about supermarkets and saying you can offer a Lidl version, you can offer a Waitrose version, or you can offer a Tesco's and a Waitrose version. All supermarkets are fantastic, but you will come out having spent a lot less if you go into Lidl. So don't forget, when all of you have written and asked Justin how much this is going to cost, I think I've gone back mainly, and Justin's gone back and said about £5,000. But if you can offer him a £3,000 option, and he'll look at it and go, well, actually, £2,000, that'll take the family on holiday. So I think I'll go for that, because it's not worth me having the Gucci dashcam option, because are they really going to want it? Is that really going to be what my customers are after? So what the client does know is his customers. So with him having options that are real and credible, it could make a huge difference to his business. So no one's come in either on the chat or on the email with anything to ask me, so I'm going to imagine that's all pretty good. I'm going to whiz on and get onto economic now. Here's my check sheet for your work on economic. Have you discussed most of the costs? Have you talked about the coder? The biggest costs are going to be the coder, because don't forget you need to get paid. What do you charge? And don't price yourself out of the out of the game entirely. Is there going to be any hardware required? I'll give you a hint. It's probably not much apart from the dashcam itself. What software is needed? Are you going to have to buy any specialized software, or will the coder provide that? Are there any subscriptions? So research those costs. Do screen prints as you go through, looking at Currys or Amazon, or Googling the cost. And by the way, if you come up with the cost of a coder from an American site and they're charging $300 a day, it's what people have found generally. You get what you pay for, but about $300 a day, and you can bank on it taking about a week to make it, but we'll get to that later on. Also, question mark, do your costs make sense? I've said this many times, but a student came back, I think last year, with a ludicrous cost of £60,000. It was a case of, well, I'm sure it's a very good app, but someone who's probably earning 30, 40, 50 grand a year, it's not going to work. You don't need server farms or Mark Zuckerberg coding for you. No, exactly, you don't. Because don't forget, they're going to be reusing some code libraries to write the booking screens. It's been done a million times. So you don't need Mark Zuckerberg. It's absolutely true. So in simple terms, list all the costs, show some alternatives, show your evidence, state which options you're recommending and why. If it costs £2,000, it's money well spent. So just make sure that you're stating why you're making those choices. And don't think that I'm looking for a certain volume of work, because I'm not. Students always ask, how much did I write? And I can give you an indication, but it's about writing quality and answering the question. This is my checklist. If what you've written is in there, then it doesn't matter how much you've written. Okay? So that covers pretty much the stuff for economic. The way you can go about it, break it down into labour, hardware, software and subscriptions, cost them out one by one, screenshot it and use tables. When you're doing the economic options, tables are the natural way of presenting data. They're easy to read, they're easy to digest, and they keep you organised as well. And a table looks great. A table takes up space and it looks great. Mr. Godfrey is saying Red and AA have launched apps in the last month. So you could do a little bit of Googling around that and see what they are offering, all right? National driving schools, their apps are going to be bigger and better. And of course, what will happen is that, as Mr. Godfrey is saying, these apps will be increasing in their features. They'll become more feature rich. this dash cam feature, the idea of being able to watch back what you did well and what you did badly, it's key. Because failing a driving test or missing something is expensive. They're, what, is it £50 a lesson? They're expensive, aren't they? And you end up booking, but people are talking about 20 lessons. So it is not an inexpensive option. And if this can help, it could be a huge benefit to a one-man band like Justin, who has to rely on himself. And he's got to keep up with these driving schools, don't forget, which is a huge challenge when they've got economies of scale. So I should pause there. I'm going to stop here and ask you if you've got anything that you want to add on the economic side of this. At least from a conceptual point of view, the economic side is pretty simple to understand. It's what will everything cost? I'm looking for you to list all of the costs and to show that you've done that research and to then make a suggestion to make a recommendation. This is what I recommend that you the options that you go with and why. And don't forget, why hasn't got to be hugely long. So I've not had any emails. I've not had anything on the chat. So can I just ask you, make sure maintenance costs are appropriate? Yeah. And don't forget, you've been given your budget. So if it's coming in with, when you say maintenance costs, an example could be if the client needs to sign up for a much more expensive data agreement that's going to be costing 50, 60, 70 pounds a month. That could have quite a serious impact when you think that's an hour's worth of teaching. And don't forget, the £50 he gets from the customer, he will only see just over half of that. Taxes are something that you lot have yet to enjoy the glory of. So that's something to look forward to when you're older. Can I ask you all in the comments, so far we've covered economic and technical. If we say that a score of 5 is you know what you're doing or you've done it and you're totally happy with these two, give it a 5. Can we go for a 4 if you're most of the way there, a 3 if you've got a few issues but you think it's okay, a 2 if you kind of get the gist of it but you're struggling, and a 1 if you are totally lost, all at sea, and you want some more help, which I can offer to you obviously after this. So could you all please put a score from 1 to 5 in the comments now, so I know exactly how you're feeling about the story so far. All right, while you're doing that, I will go on and cover scheduling. Scheduling is really quite easy. Oh, this is good. The scores come in. It's interesting. When I set this up, it said there'd be very low latency, but we're still talking about 10-15 seconds between me talking and seeing your comments. So Anushka, Keanu 5-4, Aaron 5, Elliot 5, Josh 4, Jamie 4, Tilly 4. This is good. Okay, so I'm going to whiz on to the next one. That's great. Thanks, guys, because it's nice to know that you know where you are. I think I covered this, but this is a lot of work to do. But the rest of the unit is a great deal easier once this has been done. So next thing, scheduling. I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for a Gantt chart, which you can see in front of you. That's a Gantt chart. And I'm also looking for a little commentary or a paragraph which justifies the Gantt chart that you've produced. Oh, does it? Oh, that's really handy, actually. So Mr. Godfrey's saying that the Excel has got a Gantt template now. It's brilliant. I didn't know that. Go to File, New Search, Templates, Gantt, and it's pre-filled. Fantastic. So I had given the students, Mr. Godfrey, some advice and some help on using an online tool called Tom's Planner, which you've seen. I've shown it to you. But if it's there in Excel, and obviously you get that being a student, so that would be another way of doing it. Okay, so the Excel is there. So let's jump back to scheduling. I'm looking for two things here. I'm looking for a Gantt chart and I'm looking for a bit of commentary. So let's dive in and look at this in more detail. With the Gantt chart, when I scan through it, do the headings make sense? Have you got a list of sensible tasks covering most of what you have to do? Are the tasks in the right order? Is there a commentary explaining the Gantt charts or the annotations? So I'll go through those in detail. The headings I've got in purple there. So I've had a few questions from students asking me about the headings. So don't forget, those headings match up with the product development methodology that you chose. I know most of you chose the waterfall because it's straightforward and it's the one that you studied in P1. So you've got your headings there, requirements analysis, design, implementation and coding, testing, deployment, maintenance. So I want to see, have you got the headings that link up in some way with a product design methodology? That's the first thing I'm looking for. And the reason I've written B across there on the right hand side is notice there aren't any tasks associated with the heading, because the heading is simply organizing the tasks. There are no subtasks and no time blocks associated with the requirements analysis in A. So I'll go on and look at the next one. The next thing we're looking at is it a list of sensible tasks? So this student, and don't just copy this one, because I've sort of mucked around with this one, so it doesn't exactly tell you what you want, because I don't want you simply copying it. But use requirements from client, analyze the requirements, produce a plan, create the chosen solution. All of these sorts of things I want to see in there. Have you got a sensible list of tasks? Thank you, Mr. Godfrey. Do they all make sense? I'm not expecting you to be an expert, but have you understood that A, there's a thing called a product methodology, and B, that it puts tasks in a certain order and it's a template so you don't forget things, which is what it's for. It's to keep people organized so you don't end up building a bridge and the first car drives over it and there are lots of deaths because you've not put in supports or something. That's what it's there for. It's really simple. So let's go on and look at the next thing. Do you have some idea of how long tasks may take? Now this is where you're doing a little bit of make it up as you go along. I've said to you that the coding can take about a week. You've got, I think, 4 to 6 weeks to play with. So play with these time blocks until this makes sense. But if you have the coding as lasting 1 day, that would suggest you've not really thought about it. If you have the testing lasting 6 weeks, that would suggest that you're very slow at testing. So it's amazing how people are more concerned about doing this until they actually make the Gantt chart. And then by the time that you've estimated how long things take, you'll find it's pretty close to 6 weeks. All right. So any issues with that, you need to let me know. So that's the scheduling side of things. Have I done more on the scheduling? I have other tasks in the right order, because they should follow an order. And I've got the earlier tasks up top and the later tasks at the bottom. And you end up with that idea of the blocks dropping away to the right hand side. That's the shape of Gantt chart we're looking for. It doesn't actually have to be that shape, but I think for the sake of ease and simplicity, it's probably a good idea for you to do that. Now I've done my commentary here is very simple, but I just wanted to give you an idea. I've put in, you've got to turn your head slightly to one side. Coda estimated 5 working days. I have allowed 7. Now I had to put that arrow in a wonky, slightly wonky, because I didn't want to block out my text. But if you had a series of annotations like that, just explaining what was going on behind your eyes when you made the Gantt chart, that would be great. If not, write a paragraph explaining. Okay, explain your thinking, why you said a week, and it needn't be hugely detailed. But if you just apply the Gantt chart, the moderator could come back and say, I want to see slightly more. All right, but the Gantt chart does, I would say, 90% of the work for this particular task. And let's have a look. Mr. Godfrey has said Tom's planner is excellent too. It is good. It's easy to use. You have got the faff of setting up an account, which is annoying, and then having to cancel their spammy emails afterwards. Excel lays dependencies out in an easier way. Oh, okay. If you could make a tutorial, that would be great. We spoke about dependencies before. And that's the idea. Looking at the Gantt chart in front of you there, you can see that there are those little grey lines that run between the blocks. And if you were to drag one of those time blocks across, the one beneath it would move with it, because it's dependent on another task. Without going into it again, it's the same thing as laying foundations before building walls before putting in windows. So one is dependent on the other. I've not mentioned much about contingency time, but you really should build in a bit of contingency time in case things go wrong. What if the coder leaves? What if the coder gets sick? What could you do to solve that then? Okay, so that is the scheduling. I imagine you're all pretty good on that. It's just laying out the Gantt chart. That's the fiddly thing here. Once that's done, it's all relatively straightforward. Super. So let's go on to the next thing. Next slide. There's been an accident in the Vallely Godfrey household, so I hope everything's okay. that is the scheduling side of things. Here's my instructions. List the headings, list the tasks, rough estimate. Does it all come out at 6 weeks? This is what I'm looking for. Add the details, add some annotations, what the Gantt chart shows, and why you've made some scheduling decisions. So that is exactly what I'm looking for in the Gantt chart. Any of you, any questions, any issues, any concerns? Don't forget, if you don't feel confident putting it in the public comments, no reason not to, because we're all in this together, but my email address is there. I've got my email open over here. So if you've got anything you want to ask me, just pop it in there now. And don't forget, you can email me anytime with any concerns, issues, worries, etc. that you've got with M2. Legal. I'm looking for you having mentioned GDPR and maybe something else as well. If you don't mention something else, when I give you a mark, it'll be a lower mark, but I think, strictly speaking, if you've talked about GDPR, that's the most important thing in this. Have you explained what GDPR covers, how it affects the client, and the way that you'll demonstrate that is by explaining what information the client's collecting. And don't forget, you've got a list of those. You've got a list of the information that the client's collecting from what you've written in P2, and that also refers back to the letter which you got that information from in the first place. What does the client need to do to comply, and what are the consequences? Well, the consequences is one sentence, isn't it? It's saying what the fines are. I can't remember offhand what they are, but usually thousands of pounds. So that's all you need to do there. I'm going to go on and look at, so these are the three possible legislations. You focus on GDPR, and maybe if you did a sentence or two on one of the other two, that would be helpful. The Information Commissioner's Office Codes of Practice, easy for me to say, that's focusing on recognisable features picked up by the dashcam. And the Copyright Design and Patents Act is focusing on your coder not stealing someone else's work. And I think a simple document from the coder stating that the work is his own and that he or she is responsible for any legal problems resulting from being sued for copying would be his or her problem. That might be the solution there. But those, if you pick one of those last two there, and just a couple of lines showing that you understand what it's for, put it into your own words. And if you've watched the information on YouTube that I've put up there, that is quite straightforward. So what GDPR covers, how it affects the client, what the client needs to do to comply. This I have borrowed from searsco.com. You did a lot of this work for most of you at GCSE for Cambridge Nationals and for Unit 1 and 2 last year. So those are the ideas. I'm not going to run through it now because life is too short, but you should demonstrate that you understand what the pillars of GDPR are and how they relate to Justin's app that you're going to build in terms of the information that he is collecting from his clients. And don't forget, he does say that he doesn't want to collect any more than the bare minimum. Consequences of non-compliance and what the client needs to do to comply. So that is everything on the legal. I've popped this slide in there. This is one that I borrowed from the website. You can see bottom right there. I think this is quite a good checklist that you could use with the information collected from Justin. Not all of those are relevant, but if you have covered all of those that are relevant, I think you'd have answered that question pretty well. All right, so don't be afraid to use that one. And then let's go on. And the consequence of non-compliance. That's fine. Structure, put GDPR in your own words. That's going to be a paragraph or two. List what's collected. Explain what Justin needs to do to comply with the regulations and state what happens if he doesn't comply. Student question, how much do I have to write? If you write 2/3 of a side of A4 to a side of A4 and it's all good material, you will have covered this. All right. If you write 12 sides of A4, you've got too much time on your hands, but it will be fantastic to read it. So that's about what we're looking for. But again, it's not about how much you write, it's about the quality of what you write. I'm asking myself, do you understand this what GDPR is and how it affects Justin and his business? That's the key thing for me. I'm going to shift on to operational. So again, this is my list of what I'm looking for from you. Do have some heart for me, because marking this particular piece of work, it takes roughly half an hour per student, so I've got a long checklist to go through. Do you, on the operational side of things, understand how bookings are made and how they're cancelled? That's what I need to know. Do you understand how things are done now? But crucially, do you understand how things will change once this app has been made and once the dashcam feature has been incorporated into his day-to-day work? So things are going to change in terms of what Justin has to do that he doesn't before, and things that he doesn't have to do that he did do before. And there are going to be benefits, and there are going to be there'll be some advantages and some disadvantages, but it'd be great if you could list the benefits, because there are benefits for Justin, huge benefits in terms of if a student cancels a lesson, it gets cancelled in real time and that slot becomes available for another student to take up. And that feature alone could save the client a lot of money and a lot of wasted time over the course of a year. And it only takes 1 or 2 lessons to be run that wouldn't have been run before, when for a single operator that can make a big difference. Okay, so let's go on, talk about structure. I would structure it this way. Once upon a time there was a driving instructor, and this is how bookings were made, this is how they were cancelled. This app is going to be created in the dash cam, and this is what's going to happen now. This is what will change. So don't forget, operational is day to day. What happens on the shop floor? What happens at the chalk face? What people actually do. Not what they think, what they do. So what is going to change in what he does, his behaviour, and then discuss the advantages and disadvantages. And that's fairly straightforward. People often get the concept of this one slightly wrong, so just make sure you're happy with the areas that you're covering there. So this is my final checklist, which is really a recap of everything I've done so far. Set the scene, describe the technical solution with alternatives, show all the costs, cite your sources. You have to cite your sources because it's plagiarism if you don't. Something I haven't said here, but which is absolutely blindingly obvious, is that the work needs to be yours. And I cannot emphasize enough how it is so obvious when someone uses someone else's work. Students often think they are master forgers, but trust me, you're not. So don't just copy someone else's work. Cite the sources. It's so important. And every exam board, they're really hot on that. Make recommendations, show your understanding of the legal implications, show understanding of what happens day to day and what changes day to day. Obviously, I'm talking about operational there. Is there a Gantt chart? Have you got some annotations? I've put in, I have asked on my videos for a risk versus likelihood assessment, a risk assessment. If it's not there, it's not a core requirement. And then appendices at the end, your bibliography, citing all your sources. Is it all there at the end? I'm going to pause there because I want to have a drink of water, and also because I want to see if any of you have got any questions, because Mr. Godfrey's asked a lot of questions, but he's gone now. So if any of you, and that's fine if you don't, because it means that you've got a good understanding of what's being done, but if any of you got any questions on anything I've covered so far, again, a 15-second bit of music while you think about your questions and get them through on the chat to me. Right, that's quite enough of that. You haven't asked me anything, which can only be good news, and given your understanding of the trickier task at the start of this, I'm assuming that you know what you're doing. If you don't, just contact me. I'm here to help. I might be away from you, but I am here to help. So just ask me if you're struggling. Oop, I have got a question. Hamza's not had a reply from Justin. Hamza, do me a favour. Can you forward that reply to me, and I will get you a response to that straight away. All right. The answers to your question will be £5,000, Manchester United colours, and about 6 weeks. But Hamza, send that through to me. I thought I responded to you yesterday, actually, but send it through to me. Do it after this, and I'll get it back to you straight away. Okay. So I'm going to move on to a look forward to next week, and then a look forward a bit further on, just so you've got an overview of what's happening and where we need to go next. So we are here. Yeah, no problem, Hamza. I thought I'd done it yesterday. I had a few yesterday. Maybe it wasn't you. So M2 needs to go in on Sunday. That is the grand plan. Oh, it was you, Malika. Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, it was you. All right, good. So, yeah, if any of you haven't had the response from Justin, forward it to me and I will get back to you straight away. You'll see why in a second, because having that email trail is actually a significant part of a later task, which you're going to find out about in a second, actually. So that's quite useful. It was Malika, and welcome. So M2 is due on the 17th of May, which, if my calculations are correct, is Sunday. So that's the grand plan. Can I ask you, even if you're not 100% sure about everything being right, submit it. Because that way I can have a look at it and say, right, change this, change that. And I don't want to disappoint you, but it's likely there will be a couple of things, because M2 is a big task that you need to get right. But how it may be perfect, great if it is, but just submit to me what you've done. So P3 is the next task we're going to look at, and that one you only got a week to do that, which doesn't sound like long, but actually it's a really simple task. P3 is a question of producing, where's my camera, 4 diagrams. The first one's a wireframe, the second one is a flowchart, the third one's a data flow, and the fourth one is a use case. I imagine you're looking at that and thinking, I've not heard of any of those apart from a flowchart. The wireframe is actually just a mock-up of what your final design will do. Can I make a recommendation that when you make the wireframe, the more effort that you put into it, the better, because then you will have actually completed a second task that comes later on, where it's asking you for the prototype. So that would be a really good thing to actually get your wireframe up and running. Just use, by all means, push the boat out, create it for real, or use Photoshop. But I have to say to you that using PowerPoint is more than adequate, because don't forget, you're not a coder. So you are producing a wireframe, which is how it looks. A flowchart is showing the different processes that happen. I have put a couple of videos up on YouTube that take you through every step of the way. Can I please insist that you watch those before doing the flowchart, because people assume that they can do flowcharts, and it's quite strict as to what is and what isn't a flowchart. And people tend to produce these weird, strange designs which don't bear any resemblance, because the moderator wants to know whether I have taught you, or whether you've understood, more importantly, how to do a flowchart. There's a couple of videos there. They're not very long, but you've got to use the right boxes, the right symbols, and it's got to be designed in the right way, with one beginning, one end, no orphaned boxes over here, and it's got to be talking about the right things. A use case diagram is looking at the features that Justin will be using and the features that the student will be using. So, for example, Justin would be able to delete a client. The client's not going to have the ability to delete anything. So you're talking about access rights and access management there. The data flow is talking about the data that runs through the system in terms of the individual chunks of data. So if you think about the booking system, in that case it would be times, it would be dates, it would be what have we got? We've got times, we've got dates, and we've got days. Pretty much that's it. But anyway, you'll need to watch those videos and produce those 4, but it's not a huge amount of work compared to what you've just completed. But you will need to actually find out how to do those. And I will obviously I'll do a live stream or do a Zoom meeting next Tuesday to cover that. All right. So here we are. Here is my beautiful diagram. All right, Jamie, I will get you a response today. Forward to me your question, okay? And I'll send your response to you shortly, okay? Give me half an hour. Anyone else not had a response from Justin, forward it to me and I'll get that response in today. So here we are. This is looking forward. We have covered P1, P2, M1 and M2 you've just done. So bottom right, this is the order in which these tasks happen. 11 tasks in total, 6 past tasks, 3 merits and 2 distinctions, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's correct. So far P1, P2, M1, M2 done. The next thing is P3, which are the diagrams. Then we jump across to the right hand side, and can you see D1, which I've got as number 2 there? That's where you're going to justify your design decisions. So for example, you're going to say that you chose this font because it is easy to read. You chose this colour because it works with this colour. You thought about choosing to solve it in this way, but in fact you chose this because it's a better design, it's easier on the eye. And more examples, that you've always got this question when you're creating an app of how many pages you run the app across. The fewer pages that you use, the more information you're going to have on a screen. The more information that you have on a screen when it comes to using a phone, the more difficult it is to use. When you've got big fingers like me, you end up pressing things twice or pressing the wrong thing. There's always that sweet spot between having the right amount of information and interactivity on a screen compared to it being dragged out over too many screens. So those are the sorts of areas you'll talk about there. Again, it's not a huge amount compared to what you've just done. Then we jump back to the left-hand side to P4, and that is the pitch. And that is where, and I imagine that I'll have a Zoom meeting with each of you over the course of a week or two, and you will pitch your application to me. I will give you control of the screen, and you'll show me a PowerPoint and talk through it. All right, you'll be pitching the application to me. It sounds terrifying, but it really isn't too bad because you've done all the hard work for it. Need to be detailed speaker notes, but again, this is in many ways this is simply using the information you already have, except you're going to be using it in a different way. It's to pitch to the customer. So the pitch is a bit like Dragon's Den. Hello, my name is Hamza. I'm an app designer, and this is the problem that I had to solve, and this is how I solved it. And you'll talk it through like that, and you've got most of that information anyway. So that's number 3. I'm then jumping to the middle box, and can you see the evidence of communication with the client? And that's why I've been asking you to write to Justin to get these emails, this communication going backwards and forwards. Because what's going to happen is that for P4, which is number 3, you'll do your pitch to me. At the end of your pitch, I will say to you, because I'm acting as the client, I will say to you, I love your design, I'd like you to change this, and I'd like you to change that. And then you are going to agree those adaptations. So say, for example, I might say to you, change the boxes from being rectangular to having rounded edges. Change the background colour to being black rather than red. I'll give you a couple of changes, and you and Justin will be emailing each other backwards and forwards. You make the changes, and you simply screenshot the changes, and that's what M3 is. So it's that idea of A, communication with the client, B, improving your design through communication with the client and demonstrating it with screenshots. So that is 4. With 5, you make your prototype. So I recommend most students do it in PowerPoint. It's the easiest thing to do, perfect way of doing it. And then you can use, if you imagine a PowerPoint that's got the interface of a phone, you can use transparent text boxes to hyperlink from one page to another. And you might end up with 5 or 6 different pages where you're showing your booking screen, perhaps, where you're showing a dash cam screen, that sort of thing. You link those together. So all you've got to do is submit that PowerPoint. That's the create prototype. And that's why I said to you, going back in time to P3, number 1, the more time that you put into making your PowerPoint, your wireframe for P1, the less you're going to have to do for P5. So it may just be that for P5, you're simply going to send me what you did for your wireframe diagram for P3. I know I'm talking a lot. I'm going to stop in a second. And lastly, in fact, we've got 2 more to do. Collecting client user feedback for, that's P6, bottom left. You will create a questionnaire, and you will get your peers, your fellow students, to fill it out, to have a look at your design, and you're going to write a really good questionnaire to tease out some things that you need to improve. And then for P7, you're going to analyse your questionnaire, the responses, and you're going to make the improvements. So you're actually doing 2 sets of making improvements here, if that makes sense. You're first of all going to be doing your pitch, which is P4, number 3, and you'll get some improvements to make. You make those improvements, and then we go to M3, number 4, where you make the improvements, and then you make the prototype. You collect some information, you collect questionnaires about how good your app is, what works, what doesn't work, and then you make improvements again. So that's all that we've got left. As I've said to you each time, don't forget, OCR's difficult job is to chop up a business process into 11 equal parts, and it just doesn't work. So this is why you're feeling the pain now, because you've covered so much of this. And although looking at this diagram, you're not halfway through, you're actually more than halfway through in terms of what you've had to do, because P2 and M2 are the 2 biggest tasks. I have come to a natural halt. Is there anything that any of you need from me? Any questions? Anything that you want to know about any of the things that we've covered today? I'm going to have another sip of my glass of water, and I'll give you 15 seconds. Just anything that's popped into your head, anything you're not quite sure about in terms of structure, in terms of content, in terms of looking forward. So I'll just give you a few seconds to pop that into the chat or to email me. So there is a deathly silence. As long as that's because you get it, that's fine. You can't make up questions if you don't have them. So I think that is probably enough for one day. How long have I been talking to you? 45 minutes. So this is the equivalent of letting you go 3 minutes early from the lesson. If none of you have got any questions now, that's fine. Email me, ask me, and I will set up a... can I actually ask you, which format do you find easier? We've got the... I'm going to ask you for one of three. Either both, which is you like the live streams and you like the Zoom meetings, or you can just write Zoom, or you can write live stream. So live stream, Zoom, or both. Would you rather have a combination of all three, or is there one that you prefer over the other? Because for me, it makes no difference. I do find, though, that the quality of what you're receiving from the live stream in terms of audio and video is a lot better. The Zoom is a bit crackly, and yeah, okay, live stream. Yeah, I personally prefer the live stream. It's just a question, as long as you're asking questions, if you have them. I don't mind live stream. Okay, well, I mean, I will do a combination of both. It's sometimes easier for me jumping through PowerPoints on the Zoom, but I will set up one or the other for Tuesday. If you've got anything you want to cover for Tuesday, let me know. Can I ask, before we meet on Tuesday, have a look at the P3 playlist on YouTube. Yeah, you're all saying live stream. Okay, until he doesn't mind. All right, good. Can I ask you, look at the playlist on YouTube for P3 before Tuesday, and we'll run through it that way. You are doing an amazing job of keeping up with this coursework, given that you are at home, that we're communicating in this weird and strange way. So keep up this work. I will look forward to looking at your M2. And don't forget, even if you haven't finished, don't stress. Get to me what you've done so far. All right, guys, have a fabulous weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday. Bye-bye.